All right, so we had seen yesterday in the Imrei Yaakov, in the Likutim, that you're not allowed to destroy food. And yet, in the Likutim, he says, Osa Adam Tzrachav Befas Mili Delo Mimis Be. You're allowed to do whatever you need to with bread. You can use bread for a utility item, to prop it up, to use it as a doorstop, provided that it doesn't um, uh, make the bread dirty or inedible in the process. Okay, so that is also related to the issue of whatchamacallit, of baltashchis. So if you take a look at Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber writes, "Shalolinhog bizayon ba'ochlim." You're not allowed to conduct yourself in any way that is going to disgrace or treat badly food. Osa adam tzrachav bepas v'hani mili delo mimis bei, aval midi de mimis bei lo. But if you're going to do anything with bread that is going to cause it to become in any way degraded, then you're not allowed to apply that use to bread. Hilchos ein manichan alav basar chai. You're not allowed to place raw meat on a loaf of bread. The ein mavirin alav kos mole. You're not allowed to pass a full cup over a loaf of bread because wine will likely spill. The ein somchin bo hakaara in himalaya davar shim yipol al hapasim as. Nor are you allowed to use the loaf of bread as a stand to prop up a container of cooked food, such that if the cooked food were to spill on the bread, it would make the bread unsightly, unseemly. When I was in Israel just recently, I had a bowl of soup in a bread. You know how they do that? An onion soup, yeah. But then you eat the bread afterwards, so it actually is not. It's part of the meal, so it's actually a good thing. So that's. But let's say you wanted to use your bread as a container, but the food is going to spoil the bread. So that's what we're talking about. And you're not, another example of using food in a wasteful way that makes it no longer consumable is, let's say you can't find water, so you want to do netilas yadayim with wine instead, because that was a much more available beverage in many cases. He says you're not allowed to do that. Afilu netila she'ena tzarech achila, even if it's not for the purpose of eating. Ve'ein zorken hapas mishum bizayon ochel. You're not allowed to throw bread because that's a disgraceful way of treating bread. Just like you can't throw bread, you also can't throw other foods that will become in some way degraded through throwing them. But throwing something that will not become degraded in the process of throwing it, such as nuts, pomegranates, and quinces or apples, so that would be perfectly okay. We take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Yeah, it's a Sephardi custom, and for some reason it doesn't take this into account. So there is a discussion, I know, among some of the Sephardi poskim to justify the practice. Right, but the Shulchan Aruch says explicitly you're not allowed to do that. So the Mishnah Berurah over here says, "V'im osa l'refua," if however you're degrading a food product for the sake of creating a medicinal cure, it is permitted. Afilu mimespe. V'afilu below refua im hudavar shehu tzorech ha'adam v'derech ha'olam lasos b'ha'ochel tzorech zeh gam kein shari. But beyond that, he says, if it's not for the medicinal purposes, but the world conducts themselves with this practice for that particular food, even though the food gets degraded in the process, it would be permitted. Mitam zeh, mizalfen akarka biyayin. And for that reason, it was very common when they had dirt floors, they would sprinkle wine on the floors to act as a deodorizer and also to keep the dust down. And they would do specifically with wine because wine had a fragrant and a sweet smell. I can't imagine what kind of bug situation they must have had in their homes. Yeah, but they probably weren't worried so much about bugs back in those days. V'sachin haguf biyayin v'shemen kimavur b'gemara b'kama duchti. And also the Gemara does permit you also, let's say, to use oil and wine to anoint your body. I mean, people can take, let's say, olive oil, which is a very good salve, and you can use it, let's say, if you have dry skin. You're allowed to take olive oil, even though it's a food. You can use it as a salve. Asr liftso azeisim litol yadav b'mayim hayotzim mehem shechazakim hemu ma'avir mesazuhama. He says what you're not allowed to do is crush olives and the olive juice. We're not talking about olive oil because olive oil, it takes a while you have to do something with the olives. You have to age them in order to extract their oil. But when you take fresh olives, the juice that comes out of them when you crush them is very strong. It's, I don't know if it's acidic or what it is, or maybe a base. And it's very, very strong. It's like, and it has this very strong detergent agent that can remove all kinds of foul odors and substances off of your hands. So he says that you're not allowed to do. Because that's not a common practice, and it's something that's going to destroy the fruit in the process. And so therefore that's not permitted. Another thing that the Shulchan Aruch says, this is again having to do with bizui ochlin, disgracing or degrading food. Lo yeshiv adam al kupa malaya te'inim v'grogeros. A person should not sit on a box that's filled with figs or raisins. Aval yoshev hu al eagle shel devela o al kupa malaya kidneys. But you are allowed to sit on a fig cake or on a box that's filled with beans. So what's the difference? He says, Kupa malaya te'inim. He says, Dafka bekupa shel nitzarim shehi nechvefes v'ochel misakim v'nimasim aval shel eitz shari. He says, we're only talking about a basket because when you put your weight on a basket, it's going to crush the contents inside. But if, let's say, you have a wooden box that holds these things, a crate, right? Then there's nothing wrong with it. And the reason why a fig cake you can sit on it, is because it's not going to be harmed in the process because it's very hard and it's sturdy. So that's not a problem. And also you can sit on a basket of beans. Here, sit on this bean bag, right? That's what people have. People have bean bags, right? Right? Why is that okay? Because you're not degrading the beans by sitting on them because the beans are hard. Okay. People who what? Well, they're doing that to produce wine. They're producing wine. Well, you'd wash your feet before you do it. Ask Lucy. Okay. Now, mutter lechol daisa, you're allowed to eat cereal, and this is hot cereal, chita haniklefes mevusheles, which basically explains it's like a porridge, but it's pearled wheat that is cooked. It's basically like an oatmeal, but instead of oatmeal, it's wheat meal. Okay, the pas, you're allowed to use a piece of bread to scoop up the cereal. The makom kaf instead of a spoon. But that's only if you eat the bread afterwards, like that onion soup, right? And those who are careful will make sure to put a little bit of the bread in their mouths every time they take a spoon of the wheat meal. Um, and the Ramah says, and whatever's left over from the bread, you should eat also, to show that you are not using the bread in a deprecating way. Um, and the reason why, it's very interesting. So the Mishnah Berurah says you can use the bread instead of a spoon, because you're allowed to use bread as a tool, as a utility item, provided that you're not deprecating it. And for you, it's not being degraded because you're eating the porridge with it and you're going to be eating the bread with it. Now, it's true that for another person, it might be degraded after you've stuck the bread in the wheat meal. But as long as you're eating it, that's okay. And that's why the Ramah says that you should make sure you eat the bread at the end. Because for another person, that bread has been degraded. In other words, when you get that bowl of onion soup, if all you eat is the onion soup because you're on a no-carb diet, then you should not order the onion soup. That would not be appropriate because that really is a baltashchas issue, right? Because and even though it's a nice presentation and everything, that's where you get into the issue of baltashchas. Okay. Yeah.
You're talking about a bigger problem here. How much food do you waste today?
We waste huge amounts of food.
Every single bite. It's
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
Your food was a problem. Your shortages, you had to make food life was so different. It's not applicable to us. But today,
Right.
3/4 of our food goes into compost.
Okay. I guess we'll have to hold it here because we will not. I will be away next week, going to Dubai, Bezrat Hashem, if all goes well. We will resume Shir a week from Monday. Okay, Bezrat Hashem. Inshallah.